I'm JetGirl777, and you're listening to the Pump Wash Podcast. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Pump Wash Podcast. I have a really cool guest with me here today. You may have heard of him, but you may not have seen his face or even heard him talk. This is Scott Frazier. He is in charge over at the IJSBA, and he is also the promoter and the kind of manager of the IJSBA World Finals. One of the main reasons why I wanted to have him on the podcast today is that this guy is really at the helm of the sport. And I think there's a lot of discussions online about this guy. And, I think he doesn't do a lot of interviews. He's not really on Facebook or social media. So today I want to give him the chance to kind of unpack some of this stuff, tell us a little bit more about himself, and we kind of dive into some of these things that are circulating online. And you can hear it from the man himself instead of making your own assumptions or what you heard on the internet or hearing it, from a blog or a bulletin somewhere. So, Scott, thank you so much for your time, and I'll let you introduce yourself.
All right. Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity. I'm Scott Frazier. I'm the president of IJSBA. Now in 2025, I am the longest serving person to hold that title. And we're headquartered right here out of Half Moon Bay, California. So ask whatever you want.
The first thing I want to get into is how you ended up in this position with the IGSBA and kind of your background with watercraft, because I think a lot of people only hear about, what you're doing day to day, with the World Finals and things like that. And like you said, you've been at the helm for a while. So how did you get there?
So I'll give a good historical thing on here, even take it all the way back. Uh, in the 80s, when I was in high school, I was really into off-roading and boating and wanted to do these things. And my folks laid it on straight that if I was going to do dangerous stuff, I couldn't live in the house with them paying the bills. So right after graduating high school, I went to the local college's firefighting and EMT program right away, and I was working as a busser in a restaurant. And I saw a Sea-Doo watercraft, and I figured that perhaps I could grab one of these, and it's a gray area that my parents wouldn't totally drop the hammer on me.
Okay.
And so I got a Sea-Doo. I was racing by 1992. I had finished the fire program and it got accepted to a university in Hawaii for a pre-med program, and did my very first World Finals that year, 1993. And on the way back, I was on a plane with a couple of cats that were doing water work
Hmm.
and just started making more friends through that experience. I didn't stay in Hawaii. I transferred back to the Bay Area so I could also do more racing. Switched my majors. Went to undergraduate, graduate school in the Bay Area while I was racing. I started the tour in 1997. Won my division in 2000 while I was attending my first year of law school. Right after law school, I was still competing, and I was elected the very first racer to serve on the board of directors for IJSBA. And that was, I think, in April. And then that August, I was working as a movie set attorney and doing some stuff with music and NFL players. I got the opportunity to to come and be the president of IJSBA and run the organization. So at that time, I probably dodged a bullet. I was interviewing to work for Lou Pearlman and possibly be Aaron Carter's road manager. That's what I
Oh
was
boy.
doing with some bands. And it's hard to say which one was the bigger bullet to dodge, but I took the IJSBA job because it allowed me some things at home. I had a young daughter and who I shared custody with. So it was a good opportunity for me to base back at home, things like that. When I got the job at IJSBA, the first order of business I found out was they were canceling World Finals. People had already shipped stuff, and I tried to turn the thing around. And so that was it. What was meant to be a few years uh, lasted a lot longer than a few years. So I guess that's it. That's how I got there. That's a very, very short version of it, although it felt long to say.
No, that was great. I think there's a lot of people that probably don't realize that at one point you were a racer and enthusiast too. They just see you as like, the guy in charge now. So that's cool to hear.
Yeah,
Um,
I was on a C, I guess you'd call it the B minus team for C2, not even maybe the full B team, but I had a B minus deal through one of their marketing groups that also got to give racing sponsorships long before there were such things as brand ambassadors.
mhm.
I was tied to the hip with a dealer, with probably the Bay Area's biggest dealer, and they would have me as the speaker at some events. Did a couple of TV programs for the colleges, and was the representative at the boat shows
Hmm.
for Sea-Doo, the speaker at those. So I got to do a lot of stuff besides race. But yeah, I raced Region One, Region Two, the BP Endurance Racing Series, and the Tour. I think at my busiest year, I was home 6 weekends.
Hmm. That's rad. That's cool to
Uh,
hear. So my next question is going to be, I think there is some confusion about what your role is between the IJSBA and the IJSBA World Finals. My understanding is those are actually kind of two different roles. Can you kind of open up on one, what your position and kind of day to day as IJSBA president looks like, and then two, what your role is with the IJSBA World Finals?
so, this is correct. My job description, nor was I hired to produce the IJSBA World Finals. When I came on, there was a contractor, as there had been I think the year before IMG had done it. And this is an important thing to know about the series of IJSBA. It used to get a massive cash cow from the manufacturers who control effectively the organization. And right around 2003, they slammed the brakes on that. They were like, we don't know what sales are going to be like. We don't see running this organization at the expense that it is. So it was downsized quite a bit. There was a director that was put in before me to manage it at that level, and he is the one who had brought me on. So I get this job, and like the first week that I'm there, it's like, hey, there's maybe some problems here, but we're thinking you can figure them out. And that was they just couldn't come to an agreement on salvaging the promoter. The promoter had never fully ratified his contract, which in August that was pretty late to have not had done. But nonetheless, in about 2 months, I raised 200 some odd $1,000, protected the event, and then we kind of just started getting to work of what this new arrangement looked like. But yeah, the IJSBA World Finals was not what I was brought into IJSBA to do. I sort of inherited it, and it has been an evolving thing ever since. Much has, as you asked, what is my day to day thing at IJSBA? That's changed dramatically. I mean, that has changed dramatically. When I took this organization, we still had, it's probably 50, 60,000 in DVD sales. Maybe not that much, but we certainly had a lot of money in DVD sales. We still sold merchandise out of the house. We had a much larger affiliate program. Um, there were a lot of things that were done at that level. And as time went on, obviously we got out of the producing a DVD. That was a lot. The biggest thing for me was that we switched during my tenure from a two-stroke based sport to a four-stroke base
Yeah, that was a big
sport. I
one.
mean, I think for the first 2 years of my career there was sorting out how to handle hydrospace and how to handle what was coming next with everything switching to four stroke, with some people believing that that was only a temporary thing. When I say some people, it certainly wasn't the manufacturers or anybody in government.
Yeah.
It were people in the sport who believed that, oh no, two strokes are going to go forever. And I think if you saw the writing on the wall, they weren't. For those that don't know, I ended up with a undergraduate degree and master's degree in political science, specializing in American political institutions. So between that and my law schooling, in which I was the president of Sports Entertainment Law Society, that was my focus in there, was to do that type of work when I got out. I was prepared to meet these things, right? One of the next problems that came up is the loss run. There was a right around then there was a pretty big lawsuit that had happened in the states over a personal watercraft striking a
Mm.
swimmer at an event up here in Northern California, which is an extraordinarily litigious place to live.
Yeah.
And the junior program that had recently been developed, which is going pretty good, was in jeopardy. The amount that insurance was going to cost was getting astronomically high. So part of the job that I had at IJSBA was going in and reworking some policies with some of the regulatory bodies that granted racing permits. That was starting to take more and more time. And at the same time, I started getting involved in what was happening with the insurance underwriting and started redeveloping the entire waiver system. I mean, the entire system, how it is thought about, how it is calculated, what type of coverage we get, what we contract with the racers to provide and to not provide. And, I think in 2006 dollars, a insurance policy for a weekend was $2,500 or $3,500 in those days, and I got it drastically down from that. It's of course creeping back up, but we're just above half of that in 2024
Mhm.
dollars. The 2024 policy is about 1650 for a weekend. So, if it was 3500, like I think it was, then we're, right at a little bit less than half
Mhm.
of what we were paying for it. So, then of course during my tenure we had two economic downturns. One which was historic since the Depression. We had a lot of stuff thrown at us in Havasu, amoeba, competing festivals, things
Yeah.
like that. And things we treaded water pretty good until COVID. Then we hit COVID, and I was able to guide us through that. I essentially bet the farm on COVID, but looks like we are going to get out of it. So there's a lot of changes that have happened. While I have less to do, I don't have to put boxes of shirts or DVDs in a case and ship them off anywhere. But some things have gotten more complicated. Some matters like say a U.S. promoter sometimes has difficulty securing a permit, or there'll be a regime change and they'll want to change something. Some of those things are 8, 12 hour jobs
Yeah.
where I did not necessarily have that degree of work before. I spend, you know, 10, 15 hours just renegotiating some parts of the insurance policy, going through and researching new case law, things that are happening with respect to what, you guys call the waivers, which is actually an assumption of risk agreement. So a lot has changed in what I do, and I've evolved with it and it's evolved with me, but it's kept a sport that is economically difficult to sustained.
Yeah. So if I were to try and simplify it for the jet skiers to get a grasp on it, like, would you say the president role is more like overseeing, like you saying, like the insurance, the waivers, dealing with our promoters and helping them get the stuff that they need to have their events, and more like top level organization, whereas your role with the IGSBA is more about the cost and the groundwork to make that event
Well,
happen?
so there's even more than that. There's regular meetings with, and doing some feedback with some of the manufacturers, making sure that the point of IJSBA is to have a personal watercraft racing organization that is consistent with the outlook of the manufacturers.
Hmm.
And it makes good sense because they are the ones that are dumping massive amounts of money into keeping the product legal and meeting Coast Guard requirements. And they are the ones who know what this product is going to look like 5 years from now.
Yeah.
And making it important that there's always a place that are going to showcase the products. We are a sport that is based purely off of a recreational product that you go into a showroom and buy. And to really screw things up, the average buyer is a 45 to 55-year-old white male who probably is buying it mostly for a family,
Hmm.
but also is buying it as a thrill craft that maybe seems a little bit less dangerous to get some instant gratification out of. This skews this skews the opportunity we have for partners who want to see a younger demographic of purchasing the actual product. So you got to wade through things like that. Each year we do a rules update. I'm primarily the person who takes the information, synthesizes the information, puts it out there, gets feedback, prepares it for a voting, and writes the rules for peer review, and then puts them into a context, hopefully, that are as understood in the way that they were meant to be. They
Mhm.
probably by
So
now have said everything.
it sounds like you're shouldering a lot of this stuff yourself. Do you have people helping you, or are you running most of it?
Well, I'm fortunate to have a lot of support base, but this is part of the problem is that there are not financial resources to uh, pay too many more people. I had an in-office assistant for a long time, and she was really good. I would get a couple of interns for a while. Then I had a full-time assistant. She handled the membership. Um, and I think I paid her 17, $18 an hour, and it was a great deal. There's
Mhm.
no one that's going to do that work around here now for less than 35
Right.
$35 an hour, and we just do not have the resources to do it. So I handle just about all of that work almost unilaterally. I take on, I guess my dual prongs are that I'm the CEO and the general counsel of the organization and try to get as much of the ancillary work done as I can under that. Your question about, I think you asked, how does this float over in and out of World Finals? Is that
Mhm.
so this becomes a question that as the board has to deal with soon as we start preparing for the leaders of the future is one of those questions is I have about 400 man hours into preparing for World Finals. Is that IJSBA's role or is that World Finals role? And
Right.
if so, does World Finals pay me? Does World Finals pay IJSBA for that? Is there a quasi, which it kind of is? Promoting duty is shared with a few people there at World Finals, but these are questions that probably have gray or undetermined answers. The bottom line is I sit at this desk. I do this particular work. The actual company that I have an agreement to provide contractor services for is IJSBA. And while I am doing a lot of the World Final stuff, that is outside of the job description that I was brought on to do.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense to me. I think a lot of people don't necessarily understand that. And going back to what you were saying about, not necessarily having the resources to hire more help. Again, you're dealing with, the help at the IGSBA World Finals is different resources, different bucket of money, sponsorships, things like that. But getting help for the IGSBA, you're saying no more DVD sales, no more merchandise, really. Where do resources for the IGSBA come from?
Well, and this
Memberships?
is so memberships are a part of it. Affiliate dues are part of it. The manufacturers have to pay a dues
Hmm.
each year to do it. And even when the IJSBA has had a contractor do World Finals, there's an amount of licensing money that the contractor has to pay. Typically, when you have those arrangements, you have you might say the licensing organization gets 25% of the take, 30% of the take,
Right.
or some amount like that. There's a lot of companies out there. I don't know how many of them will raise their hand and say I was one of them, but they've gotten a lot of freebie work out of
Mm.
sponsoring World Finals. They've gotten probably that same amount of money a couple of years, and someone going through, hey, could you take a look at my this or my that? And I've always done it
Hmm.
for them. This really, if you're asking like me internally, I think I felt like at some point my what my relationship with the organization is it's felt like it turned into the deacon of a church more than it necessarily did like it was just a part of there's a philosophy here and keeping it together and keeping the lights on and
Yeah.
making sure that there was a tomorrow for all of this and making sure that if a guy had an idea in Serbia or someplace else, there was a factually backed organization with a pedigree and a person behind it with the qualifications to make that that to make the case for someone to approve that.
Hmm.
And that's been working. That's been working.
Yeah. So then I think my other question would be like the flip side of that, looking at the World Finals, I know there's a ton of cost associated with that, which we'll get into later. But, at the end of the event, if you make $25, 50 cents, whatever, does that go towards the next World Finals then? Like, again, those buckets are totally separate.
So I'll say this in vague terms. We had talked about this when we set up the interview. Um, I'm going to welcome you out to the office to view some of this stuff if you have the time to come out and do it.
Appreciate that.
And it's not like there's a big wave of secrecy here. There are things that first, it's not my job to put that out there. That's one.
Yeah.
I already deal with enough nonsense questions. Our trophy fees, for example, World Finals trophies, $20,000. That's how much it costs to buy those trophies. I don't want to get 20 phone calls of how somebody else could do it cheaper or, how much I'm paying or what they should look like for that price. I don't have that kind of time,
Hmm.
right? So, but here is a thing to know, and maybe this will help answer it without getting into complete specifics. When I took IJSBA, there wasn't even $1,000 cash reserves
Hmm.
left in the organization. Okay. Pre-COVID, I had our cash reserves up to almost $200,000, probably right at about $200,000
Nice.
by every time World Finals is done, sectioning away an appropriate amount of money as the licensing fee to IJSBA. COVID came, and I essentially looked at first, we had an agreement with Lake Havasu City, which we had to produce it. There was not any clause in there to say I escaped this or whatever. We had a 10-year deal, which is broken up into a 5-year mandatory years, then a 5-year renewal. All right,
Hmm.
optional renewal. So my position was, you know what? A, this contract is voidable, and they might do that. They might do that. Who the hell knows what's going to happen in this COVID if I don't do World Finals,
Right.
right? The second part is if we don't do World Finals, we might not get another one,
Yeah.
right? So I went to the city. The city was willing, probably, listen, it was probably a no lose situation for them. I'm the kind of guy that can take a royal beating. So if I did, it was Havasu's first event
Hmm.
after
Yep.
COVID, right? So I can take the heat, I can take the beating. I pull a lot of rabbits out of the hat. If I pull this off, I
It's
pulled it
great.
off, and now
Yeah.
things can start happening. And if I don't pull it off, I was probably a good fall guy for for
You're
it
used
being
to
a
being the
disaster.
villain, I feel like.
Right, right. So it was a no lose situation for them. So 2020 and 2021, I decimated this company's finances.
Mm.
I mean, decimated this company's finances. And slowly after that was a growing period, right? So we are this year in the highest financial position we have been since COVID. We don't
That's good.
have quite the cash reserves, but we have a cash reserves to operate this company and to say that we can put on a world finals without it being a complete failure if some things don't happen, a natural disaster or another economic breakdown.
Mhm.
There's enough money left in to pay for some kind of a world finals
Right.
to keep it going in the event of an emergency.
Gotcha. Cool. Well, I appreciate you opening up a little bit. I know sometimes finances are touchy. So, one, I appreciate your transparency, and two, I hope I can make it out there. I'd love to look into some of that stuff with you.
Well, let me give you another one here. All
Okay,
right.
I'm
Here's
listening.
here's the scoop. I mean, this is one of the $1 million questions. How much? Listen, you probably got a lot of people find out how much he makes, how much he
All
keeps.
right.
Let's
You
find
heard it
that out.
here
All right.
first. You heard it here
Okay.
first.
Okay. All right. Here's the deal. Including all the accounts receivable, World Finals may have done $310,000 this year, maybe 320.
Is
That's
that
if
is that
all the account.
but is that profit or is that before we take everything?
No,
Right,
that's
exactly.
how much it made. That's how much it made, right? The budget that I submitted to the board, I believe I estimated the minimum cost was to be about $270,000.
Mhm.
So there may have been a 50, 60% swing there. Now, $1 million question. Do I keep all of that? No. All right. Most of it goes back in the company coffer. As disappointing as this may be to people in the industry, I do have to be paid for my services. I do have to be paid, and sooner or later, someone else will do that, or I'll get hit by a bus or something like that, and someone else will do it. That person will
We'll have to get
also
paid.
have to be paid,
Mhm.
right? And I suspect they won't do it as cheap as I do. They certainly won't do both. The
Mhm.
average, the the amount of risk, the personal and legal risk that I take for being in that organization, it would be about a 30 to 40% take. All right. So if I was scooping $150,000 out of that event, I'd be entitled to every penny of it. But I am not getting anywhere in the solar system of that. I'm not even getting what my set compensation at IJSBA is supposed to be. I like doing this work. I love the sport. I've been in it since I was 19 years old. Every once in a while, I can pressure one of our OEM overlords into getting me a shiny new product that I
Mhm.
would like to have at either super low cost or maybe at no cost. Maybe I said, hey, I've kept this price for you for too long. You need to come through for me with something because I want those things. I like participating in power sports.
Mhm.
There's some ancillary benefits to me being some sort of a brand ambassador, which we can go into later. But those are the things that keeps this floating. I'm able to manage my law practice. I had ailing parents that I don't have anymore. I raised a daughter and was able to make every single school reading award. I mean, I did not miss one of my daughter's special events or presentations or anything at her school. Uh, and I was able to keep all of this going. So
Mhm.
those are the benefits to me for doing this, for continuing to do this job.
Yeah.
And it's not as financially driven as I think people would like to believe it is.
Yeah, and we're going to get into some of the, online rumblings in a minute, but before we kind of walk away from the costs of things, I do kind of want to get into what it takes to put on the World Finals. Initially as someone that's partaking in racing, I went to the World Finals and I've been to several. And as I grew up and got into managing events, and even my dad and I put on a jet ski event once, I realized like, one, it's not cheap, but also it's a logistical nightmare. And a lot of times, and I'm not going to try and crap on our racers, but a lot of times the racers don't necessarily want to pitch in. They just want to show up and race and go home. So what I want to talk to you about is what does the lift of the IJSBA World Finals look like from a cost perspective, including, what your time looks like? Because your time is money and you have other things you could be doing to make money. What does it look like in terms of costs to put on World Finals? You don't have to get in the weeds, but like maybe give us an idea of some of these like big items that people don't realize cost a ton of money.
Okay, perfect, perfect. So one of these things, like I mentioned before, there's some promoter duties that are shared in this. IJSBA self promotes part of this. I guess my fingers are in some of the hospitality and
Hmm.
the trade show part of it I invented to scale this thing back. When this was produced by IMG, which I'm sure you know was the one of the premier agency groups in the
Hmm.
business, they did a massive event and Dos Equis sponsored it.
Hmm.
And they were going to start billing World Finals as the last party of summer,
Hmm.
right? And a band and freestyle motocross and all that kind of stuff. So Dos Equis was sold right after that event to Heineken, and to make that more lucrative acquisition, they cut most of their marketing. So we were a victim to that. IMG looked at the event and the realization they had to go out and find a new sponsor, and they dumped it. Right, they dumped it. So that was a ticket-based event.
Hmm.
There was a. I remember my first World Finals, 1993. I think I had to buy both of my parents, and I had a girlfriend at the time. I think I was like $50 or $60 into buying them, not just passes for the pits, but passes to actually come in
Hmm.
and watch the event. So backing up, when I came in, I was like, we need to reimagine this event. This event is not going to last too much longer as a ticket based event.
Right.
So let's expand the personal watercraft experience here and make it a an open environment, which also has every single person who wants to show their wares or show their stuff off or whatever, and let's expand the size of that. So that's largely something that I was responsible for, and that my hey, is that IJSBA's job or is that my job? That's
Yeah.
probably where that's the most wishy-washy on the subject. But going back to the base of the question, we have different sets of promoters there, right? So I don't do the fencing, porta potties, the security, all of that. That's a local based organization,
Okay.
right? And they're expensive. They're expensive, right? And as they have the right to be. Not only that is them being the primary face of the permits.
Hmm.
They got a local working relationship. They're not some jerk out of the Bay Area or whatever. But I mean, all that makes sense, right? So they do part of it that exceeds just for IJSBA primary staff on site and just the payroll that touches about $60,000,
That's
right?
paying, and
So
who's that? That's paying the score gals. Is that like our safety guys, boots on the ground?
all of that, tech people, all
Uh,
that kind of stuff,
got
right?
it.
So anyone that's doing IJSBA's side of that comes out of that payroll.
Okay.
All right. Then like I said, crazy horse ain't free,
Yep.
right? Ambulance ain't free.
Hmm.
All right. Those guys don't get fed off of their love for watching racers. That costs money. They got to go someplace at night.
Hmm.
You know, just those things alone, if you've promoted one, you can quickly see that how fast all of these things are racking up.
Right.
Payroll, trophies, and Crazy Horse, we have far exceeded $100,000
Right.
just those elements,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. And just to help back Scott up, my dad and I, like I said, we promoted a event at the Lake of the Ozarks, and I'd say what he's saying is probably pretty damn accurate. Just based on a 2-day event at the Lake of the Ozarks, it was not easy getting that stuff lined up. And then on top of that, sometimes the ambulance is like priced by the hour. Like it's kind of crazy how much money goes into it. And then you try to do a little bit extra, with the grandstands and the tower and all this other stuff, and that's just more and more and more money on top. And like you said, the World Finals has its own budget, which you're trying to carve out every year. And I imagine a lot of that budget's probably coming from sponsors, right? Or trying to.
It's I used to have it set at about a third, a third, a third. Racers paid a third, sponsors paid a third, and the OEMs paid a third.
Mhm.
And it doesn't quite work out that good. It fluctuates, from time to time, but that's how I use to set it up. And then again, we also have the biggest elephant in the room, which comes back to who is the promoter. And I don't think anyone will dispute this part of it. Um, IJSBA is not who most of those people feel like, despite what the contract says, right? They're not extending IJSBA credit. They're extending me credit on my 20-year history of paying absolutely every single bill
Yeah.
that's there, right? This event would not be able to happen if you had to pay all these bills
Yeah.
up in front.
Yeah.
It would
And
not
and
be
if you're
able
not
to
good
happen.
on it, if you don't come through or you're late or, bounce checks, whatever, they don't want to work with you anymore. Like that's really important is working with those vendors.
And then for people who have a labor of love, which is a lot of people, don't think that the Desert Steel crew is working for what they should be getting,
Yeah.
right? They're not getting I'm a retired cop, retired correctional officer. I want to get out of the house every once in a while and see some cool racing and all that kind of stuff. And the least miserable you can make that for them by not bouncing checks and not trying to be the most extreme jerk, which a lot of racers tend to excel at, I'm afraid to say. You can keep people below scale.
Yeah.
We probably had a lot of people on the ground on the IJSBA side who this is a labor of love.
Yeah.
And I think some of that love is burned out. That heat killed that heat this last year's event, kind of like, yeah, maybe I don't want to do this for $20 an hour
Yeah.
anymore, whatever I'm effectively making.
Mhm.
So this event is going to be a lot more expensive in 2025.
Yeah.
A lot more
No,
expensive.
I could see that. So before we get into the stuff that everybody wants to hear about, the drama, one of the last things, oh, don't let it slip my mind. Um, Shoot, maybe I just forgot. All
Okay,
right,
we'll
well,
come
we'll
back
move
to it.
on. We'll come back to it if I remember. Yeah, so something that I really want to touch on, and I'm hoping to play the middleman here and a little devil's advocate. I'm sure you're aware that social media has a way of just, snowballing. People come to their own conclusions or they invent things. And I think in our industry, I see a lot of things circulating where, we don't know for sure if that's true, or so and so said it was true and everybody took it as Bible. So I kind of want to go through some of the things that, at least in the last year, that I've seen popping up a lot and just give you the opportunity to address them. Because I think a lot of times, like I said, you're not on Facebook. You don't really do interviews. So I figured this would be the easiest way to just chat about them and see if we can debunk some of this stuff.
Okay. Well, shoot.
Cool. So right now, we'll see how I feel after the end of this conversation. But for now, I'm calling you IJSBA's most misunderstood man because I personally, like I said, I've helped promote events in the past, and I know that, there's not one single thing to blame. There's shifts in the economy, there's shifts in sponsorship dollars. The racers, even though they're there to race, they still contribute to our ecosystem themselves, and none of that is really under your control. So I think that we should hear you out. So the first thing that I want to talk about, which there was a lot of rumblings about this year, especially in last year as well, would be the homologation rules for the aftermarket holes. I know specifically there was some drama with Pro Watercraft, but in general, I would love if you can kind of explain what that rule is, because homologation is a big scary word, and I don't know if a lot of jet skiers know what that means, and kind of why that rule exists, because like you said earlier, you're looking 4, 5, 6 years down the road. You're talking to Cali, you're talking to Yamaha, and not like jet skiers are looking at this bubble, right, of racers. And you're also plotting up here, but we don't necessarily know what's on your mind. So starting there, let's just talk about the rule in general and then maybe get into some of the online chatter.
Do you have a specific question, or am I supposed to stream of consciousness this one?
Stream of consciousness is good. Maybe just start with specifically this year you released like the rule I think was coming, but it's been locked in
It's
on.
been I think I first posted 2018 or 2019
Mhm.
that, like, look, people, this is going to change. Start getting ready for it. The days that you can build a ski in your own garage, a hull in your own garage, and bring it out here and race it will be coming to an end.
Yeah.
So start preparing for that now.
So
That was around 2018, 2019 that started.
so let's start there. 2018, 2019. Why did you feel the need to warn them and have that shift? Like, why can't we just bring our own race hull? It's kind of like a bullet. It's kind of like a Pro Force. Why can't I race it?
So there's several reasons why this evolution started occurring. The first is IJSBA's rules used to be that you had to replicate the upper deck,
Mhm.
right? So we at least knew what the upper deck was going to be. It was going to be just like
An
just like
SXR, a
an
Superjet.
SXR, exactly, exactly.
Mhm.
So it was going to be that, no questions there,
Mhm.
right? Below that, there were some pretty tight guidelines. What the chines had to be, and personal manufacturing probably wasn't developed enough that people were going to get all that exotic on their own.
Right.
You know, what hydrospace was able to accomplish, let's be frank, was accomplished by billionaires, one of the largest employment groups in Austria, who had a passion for motorsports, right place, right time. The European spring was happening. The EU is now this cohesive economic powerhouse with a spring of wealth that was going everywhere. And so they were able to produce a watercraft which sold in Europe with a turbo four stroke and
Hmm.
a race hull and all this stuff, was sold for pretty close to the same price that an imported SXR two stroke was,
Hmm.
right? So I think it was within $1,000 or so. And their position was, by the time you account for our handle pole, which is as good as an aftermarket handle pole and
Hmm.
all the goodies, forget the turbo four stroke, you're already getting a better deal,
Yeah.
right? So so that was the closest exotic one-off manufacturing
Right.
was.
And they had the means to mass produce them too. It wasn't just like five or ten at a time. Like they were a lot of hydro spaces.
There was a lot of hydro spaces. The means to mass produce, I'm going to have to hold my tongue on this. Let's just say that they were able to do something others weren't able to so easily do.
Right.
Okay. So then we move along. Then oh, the ski market looks like it's done again,
Hmm.
right? Like for the third time, now we're not doing this anymore. Kawasaki stops making the SX, the two-stroke SXR,
Right.
and um, and Yamaha, who I think had already put the death nail in the Superjet, was like, "Well, if you're gonna stop, we'll keep doing this for a few
Hmm.
more years," and they did. But because of that, IJSBA was successfully lobbied to abandon the, oh, this has to be an OEM replica, and turn it into, it has to look substantially like a ski.
Hmm.
And then we shrunk the length. And then things started getting confusing, right?
Hmm.
The rules then, as they still are now, by the way, and I, like I said, like 2019, when all this started evolving, I posted this. I'm like, people, you better, this might not be what you do, but you've got to remember our rules require GP, doesn't matter what it is, you are starting with an OEM watercraft someplace.
Hmm.
You're not piecing together a bunch of stuff. You're starting with an OEM watercraft and you're building a GP off of that.
Right.
So our rules anticipated that you took an upper deck and a lower deck and separated them and
Hmm.
then rejoined a aftermarket upper deck and or lower deck or whatever it was. We still have rules now that need to be corrected that are the pump length is based off of whatever the OEM length
Mm.
was, right? So this started getting a little sticky. The speeds started getting uh, uh, painfully high,
Yeah.
right? The speed started getting to the speeds that 15 years before, when the runabouts got those speeds, people said, "Oh, this is going too fast. You better stop." Right
Hmm.
now, skis are going that speed.
Yeah.
And, we didn't have a good handle on where the turbos were going to go. And now we're seeing videos of glowing red turbos and then all this other stuff and unchecked speeds. Hell, I think it was on a two stroke that, I don't want to say his name, but somebody uh, right around that time wrapped their lanyard cord around their handle pole at World Finals,
Oh, nice.
and the ski shot off and out of the course, down the way, and
Mm.
went up into an area it shouldn't have. Right? I had to do a lot of lobbying to get us not cited for that, but I did. But that goes to show how the potential for
Hmm.
danger
Right.
for these things.
And
Now again,
does the danger factor and the speed factor, does that affect securing insurance, or is that more of like a we don't want to get sued type thing?
well, it's column A, it's column B. So I talked a little bit ago about how I reworked The
The
assumption
waivers.
of the risk agreement. That's
Hmm.
right. Okay. So the evolving case law on that, and most of it stems back from a hot air balloon case that these people had signed their waiver. Hot air balloon is dangerous. I'm probably going to die. I shouldn't go anywhere near this thing. Here's my $50, right?
Yeah.
So that's important though. I mean that is important, and not to bore the hell out of everyone even more than I probably already have, but the court's position on this has changed. In any kind of sport that was like not NFL or something like that, there was jackpot justice.
Mm.
Like, hey, you can do put on these dangerous sports, but if somebody gets hurt, well, they're going to get paid off,
Yeah.
right? They're going to get paid off either way. And I represented a freelance mountain climber who just outright disappeared. I mean, he died, I'm sure, but that was the most dangerous stuff that you could possibly do is climb a 1,000-foot mountain without any gear,
Yeah. Well.
right? And they were doing that on public property.
Oh.
So, either way, the point is that the courts were starting to soften up on these jackpot justice, but you had to meet so many criteria on these, and they in the legal biz they call it like a prong test. You got to meet a three-prong test, A, B, and C, and if you meet all those, you'll win. If not, the other guy wins, right? So one of those things in this hot air balloon was the wind picked up,
Mm.
right? And I think the balloon moved and the chain came up and whacked some lady in the head, and she needs a Mercedes because of this, right? She's got to
Of
have a
course.
Mercedes. That's the only thing that's going to fix her chain to the face. All right. So the court said, listen, here's the deal. We're going to keep refining this assumption of the risk. We're going to support assumption of the risk agreements. Yeah, you've got a right to endanger yourself if you want to do it, and they should be protected. The people that put on this dangerous stuff to a degree, as
Hmm.
long as everything is set. But one of those things is being able to fully appreciate the danger and the risk that you are accepting.
Hmm.
And as part of that, it comes to mind that a competitor cannot, at these speeds, accept the risk of serious bodily injury or death, which is as real as it can possibly be in our sport.
Yeah.
They cannot fully accept that risk if they do not know what they're lining up against on the line.
Yeah.
And that's real. That
Yep.
is real. So, our insurance underwriters, they got to make money. Most of that's pension money, and I don't need to talk about that. But so insurance companies got to make money, right? They're not going to give us policies if they don't
Make
make
money.
money,
Hmm.
right? So if we've got a $200,000 loss run, our insurance is going to be $250,000 or more. There's got to be administrative cost, and then the pension or whatever is funding the mutual fund, whatever, has got to make at least 10, 12% off of their risk, right? So anyway, that's when I started putting the clamp down that, like, look, we're not going to let you go these speeds if you're not know what kind of materials you're using,
Hmm.
what kind of what's there, how can a person protest X or Y, how do you know if the ski that you're lining up against that was developed 10 years ago, or hell, even 10 months ago, is capable of safely and stably handling these speeds that we're allowing you to go now, or that the
Yep.
latest engine programming or new turbo or whatever the hell it is allows you to go, right? I mean, I bet some people are hitting a real 75 miles an hour on that track
Yep.
on a stand
And
up, a
GP.
real
Yep.
one,
Hmm.
right? And it's not just the top speed, it's the static speeds. It's the speeds that the average speed that you're traveling now, buoy to buoy, which is also gone up drastically. I mean, if you're hitting 70 miles an hour on the backstretch for the last 2 seconds of it, I mean, that's dangerous as all hell, but big deal. What they call the golden days of the sport, probably doing 25 miles an hour out on that track, buoy
Big
to buoy. But
difference.
that's real,
Yeah.
but that's real. And now we're doing 50 miles an hour, buoy
Hmm.
to buoy.
Yeah.
And any collision or mistake whether it's a collision with another person or, which is mostly the case, someone just simply hitting the water at that speed, you're going to get seriously hurt,
Yeah.
right? You're going to get seriously hurt. And what do we have to worry the most about? If we start having appendages or designs that are so fundamentally different from what someone would expect a ski to look like.
Hmm.
What's sticking off of the ski? What's there? What's not there? Right? Like that has to be accounted for.
Right.
So we said, here's the deal. At some point in time, and it's coming really soon, you are going to have to tell IJSBA the thickness of your stuff. You're going to have to send us a blueprint. How many of these things are you making? Who's getting them? And we are going to track all of that.
Hmm.
All of that. And if you don't want to do that, you don't have to, but you're not going to raise here
Yeah.
if you don't do that. You're not going to raise here. And more so, we are going to get already only two or three people can handle the speeds, these
Hmm.
top speeds of these full GP ski. There's a lot of great racers. I mean, the racing was probably the best it was that I can remember in 10, 15 years in both the expert GP and the pro ski GP classes this year. Amazing racing. It's a lot of kids, especially some kids out there in Havasu, that kid from Australia. They're just showing major strides in their talents, right?
Hmm.
But in the end, only a few people handle those speeds.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure that there's not going to be any joker that has $1 million budget that can show up with a one-off ski and stop everybody else from doing it, or simply it's not feasible to ever make
Hmm.
a ski like that. So part of our deal is you've got to build these. You've got to build these, and they've got to be available to the general public if
Yeah.
you want to race here.
Yeah. And
So
so,
those are the primary things that why we did the homologation.
yeah. And I have two follow-ups to that. First is, a lot of people look to Supercross and motocross as like, oh, I wish our sport was like that. And you don't ever see rando showing up with some bike you've never heard of before that is not fundamentally similar to every other dirt bike on the racetrack. Like maybe it's a different brand, but the engine, the fenders, the size of it is almost always exactly the same as everything else on the track. So I think that's a fair point. My second part of that is, so what you're saying is if you're a manufacturer who's building a hole, you have to come to the IGSBA and present whatever this hole is to the IGSBA. What are you guys looking for in terms of, yes, here you go, here is your license to race these at the IGSBA. What is the actual general, like, give me the top line view of what's expected.
Okay, so this is a work in progress that started with us being just more or less keeping it as the rules as you saw them and said you need to start preparing to meet the rules.
Mhm.
So we had a couple of compatibility problems, and the board asked me to create some rules and some guides that were a little more broad than no, that doesn't look like a that. It's done. No deal. No deal. Right.
Mhm.
So we came back and I put together the first draft of a hull homologation guideline that was meant to address what was our most challenging thing at that point, which was what kind of appendages
Right.
can be
And
had on
and
this.
appendages, you mean like spray deflectors and stuff like attached to the existing jet ski hole,
Well,
generally.
sort of. Spray deflectors are that's in my list of things that I publicly put out just a little bit ago is the spray deflectors is what is an upper deck thing.
Hmm.
There are clearly some upper deck appendages that people are calling spray deflectors or a spray deflector integrated into a hood or whatever the hell, that their true purpose is to stabilize the handling, specifically when the nose drops down or goes underwater.
Right.
Okay. If that's what they're doing, there's nothing wrong with that. We just have to account for it and make a predictable set of guidelines so that people know how far they can go with that. And a tech director is not stuck flipping a coin to DQ one hole or not the other.
Hmm.
It goes to real written rules instead of someone trying to play a logic game. Well, look, that is an X is like a Y,
Yeah.
and that Y is kind of like a Z. So my A should be allowed because it's kind of like that Z, which
Yeah.
is like the Y, which is like the X,
Yeah.
right? And that is something this Hull homologation is supposed to stop.
Okay. I
So
mean,
the next
that makes
part, the
sense to me.
appendages, one more thing, the
Hmm.
appendages are okay. We had a two sponson rule, right?
Yep.
If there's a fin that protrudes down from the side of it, someone says, well, that's not a sponson because that's part of my hull now, right? No,
Yeah.
no. We need to be able to account and tell you when appendages can start and stop. And again, not have it be some, well, look at this. This is like a that, and
Hmm.
I should be okay. We need to get as close as we can to black and white rules.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people look at this because I know Chris Haggis specifically with Pro Watercraft has been very vocal about working on his hull, but he's not the only one. There are other manufacturers that have, kind of like come up with something and then kind of tried to make it apply. Like you said, like sponsons bonded between flanges and other things were bolting on top of holes. There's other people that I think have done similar stuff where they're, like you said, like they come up with something and then kind of try to massage it into the rules later on. And I think the issue maybe isn't necessarily that, oh, this is against the rules, but it's like you said, if one thing is like this and another is like this and another is like that, how do you define it at the end of
Right.
the
And we
day?
don't want situations where someone is going to one region and some equipment is okay,
Hmm.
and that same equipment is not someplace else. Hell, my first World Finals, 1993, I had, in my infinite wisdom, had bought a pig and a polk Sea-Doo because I was eligible for two classes, the 640 limited and some other runabout class. And that first time I saw that thing was at World Finals, and old man Bothwell came over and pointed to some stuff and says, that's the stuff they were supposed to be DQing back in Nebraska. You got to get rid of that. Here I am, my first World Finals, trying to grind down these little metal chines that have been glued to the bottom of the boat. And I guess those had been okay.
Hmm.
And he had advised people, they're probably not going to be okay.
Yeah.
And my investment was soured.
Hmm. Yeah. And kind of going back to what I was saying about the dirt bikes, I think obviously there's improvements on both ends to be made, but I think that like the jet skiers want our sport to be like dirt bike racing, or the really extreme one is Formula One. And like those guys have rules. Like even in Formula One with their massive budgets, like they have very specific rules about wings and aero and all of these things where fundamentally every Formula One car looks roughly the same, and they can't get very far without some kind of 50 or 60 or $70,000 fine if they go too far outside of these rules. So I think one of our issues is that we do have a lot of people in the sport that maybe they come up with something that really works, and they want it changed, or even when it comes down to, classes and things like that, we just have a lot of people that are looking at their own little bubble and not necessarily looking at the greater picture. That's kind of my take on it. I am kind of in the middle of the road here, but I think that's kind of,
That's fine. I mean, but let's give a good example on this. All right. There were some appendages that caused a lot of drama of
well,
some
we
sort. There was
we
some,
want to talk about that drama today. So if you want to
okay.
give
All
your
right. Well,
perspective of that drama, go for
my
it.
on my side, I'm going to avoid naming specific people or specific things. If you
That's
want
fine.
to, I'll go back and forth on that. But let's just
Go
say
ahead.
this. There was a fixture that could not be grounded in the rules this past year, right? There couldn't be. Now, here we are in the rule suggestion period that went on from December to, like always, it closed way later than I said it would because I got calls the day before. Oh my God, I don't have any time. We didn't get, well, how about we take a look at that fixture and make it okay, right? We didn't get that. So, for these things to evolve, do take a community,
Mhm.
right? But go on, go on.
Yeah, I think, I know you're one to kind of ride the middle of the fence, and I totally understand that, but I think there was a ton of chatter around the Pro Force specifically, and, I am not super, I try to avoid that stuff, to be honest with you, just because, there's always two sides or three sides or four sides to every story. But, there was a lot of chatter about that. I do think that you got a lot of negative kind of comments online about it, and I just kind of wanted to see generally from your standpoint what your thoughts were on that and kind of how you handled it. Because I mean, like you said, it sounds like, holes in general, this rule's coming, people know about it. And it sounds like maybe there was one particular thing that was kind of like a pain point, like the appendage discussion. Can you kind of give a little insight on your perspective of that? You don't have to name names. I don't expect you to do any of that or
Well, I'll tell you the
bring up
first
their
part is,
receipts.
okay, the first question that you asked is how I deal with it. And um, I'm the longest serving IJSBA director. Nobody lasts forever. Um, there's a couple times that it looked like I was gonna uh quickly tell someone like, look, I might be handing the keys in as an opportunity came up that might have precluded me doing this, and that was an opportunity that I had to take, but so far everything worked out. That's neither here nor there. So the point on it is, I learned a few years ago, and it becomes more relevant the closer I get to what is eventually going to be the end, is I have had years where everything went right, that I was a pinata between October and the following spring. I have had years where I don't think this is the worst World Finals that I've had, but I've gotten a beating like it was one of the worst World Finals like I've had. I have tried to address those things in the past and say, hey, I'd like you guys to know this. Doesn't change anything.
Yeah.
There are very few people that I can remember have reviewed information or factual things and either absorbed them or even read them for that matter, right? Or even read them for that matter. So it's become a thing where it's like, you know what? Back in the parenting business. I'm going to try to spend more time with kids, or maybe take out one of those off-road toys, or work on my health, or I like to cook, maybe spend more time working on specific things, playing the drums, whatever. I'm just going to go do that for a while because nothing I can do is going to change the course of these things. And listen, when I was a competitor and my brain was the sharpest it ever is, sitting in graduate school and law school, nobody had a bigger mouth than me. Nobody had a bigger mouth than me. So, there's a degree of hypocrisy that I'm not willing to rise to from my own conscience. Um, and it's that, I was part of that system. Eventually, if people want someone to do this work for them, particularly at uh, low market rate, they're going to have to make it in an environment that somebody wants to work in.
Yeah.
And that environment does not exist. Not only does it not exist, but I think I'm fair in saying this as a general statement. Sponsors are very shy to invest very much in personal watercraft racing
100%.
due to the conduct of competitors, very much.
Yeah.
Who the hell wants to spend big money when people act like this?
Yeah.
Right? I just had one of my personal products. I won't say which one it is. I want to out them. I brought up to get a tune up on it, and while we were talking about the benefits that they have had displaying at World Finals. And then I said, well, I think it's great. And this, they said, it's good for the recreational people that come,
Hmm.
but a competitor doesn't, a jet ski racer doesn't think they have to pay for anything.
Yeah.
And we are well known for that. We are well known for being ungrateful. Hell, I remember getting Quakey Sense as the title sponsor, right? That was my second year, and it came in at full price. I mean, full price, which we really, really needed at
Hmm.
that time to start our growth step. And when I announced Quakey Sense online, you can probably go back in some of the forums and see this. We didn't get competitors saying, oh, wow, great. A new company wants to invest in us
Yeah.
and showcase them. We got these jackets are junk. You need to buy Jet Pilot.
Yeah.
This is how people reacted to somebody coming and sponsoring the biggest personal watercraft event in the world,
Yeah.
which had just had the manufacturers say, you know what, we're cutting this back 95% because we don't think you're worth investing in,
Yeah.
right? So I I contributed to this problem. I contributed to it by just being the mouthiest jerk I could possibly be a few times. I think there's ways to distinguish how I was then, but in the end of the matter, I was part of that environment, and I can only go far in saying that don't do that, you
Yeah.
know. So I did it.
Yeah. I
I did
think
it.
that's probably one of my personally biggest pain points with our industry and our ecosystem is that I constantly see people usually blaming you for a lack of sponsorship, marketing dollars, or the my favorite, which is, oh, we don't have TV, we can't get sponsors. I come from a marketing background. I've personally sat down with the directors of motorsport at Red Bull and I've asked them, why aren't you like you guys could probably own the sport for a fraction of what it costs for you to fund that Formula One team. And they looked me dead in the face and they were just like, why would we do that? I think the racers don't realize one, like you said, yes, I think the behavior is an issue. We even saw that, I feel, for SPT, who came in a big way and kind of got the similar treatment as Quakey sense, where racers don't realize that that budget is so valuable and we should appreciate it. Instead, they're online complaining and, bad mouthing brands and stuff like that. But, you know, there's value in the community. And I don't think it's on your back that we're having a hard time getting sponsors when we're competing for other sports and big influencers. Where is the marketing value in jet ski racers, not just the event that Scott Frazier helps put on, but in the racers themselves when all they do is post some kind of crappy cell phone photos of them on the podium. And other than that, they just like complain on the internet. I don't think it's just on your back that we're struggling with sponsorship dollars when that pizza's already really small. And then on top of that, we have a community where they do always tend to have their hand out. And I think that makes it really difficult. And that's something
So
that I've had personal success with is that I've tried to make a business out of it instead of just being like, I'm awesome and fast. You should write me a check.
and listen, when I came in, it was funny. I'm gonna. This is probably the only time I'm gonna have been really good so far, but I am gonna use it word for word. So it's the only profanity I'll use in
Oh
this thing.
boy.
Icon Oakley
Hmm.
owns most of our old the copyrights to most of our old DVD
Hmm.
Bud Tour stuff like that. They own it. I don't know how they owned it because I don't remember them being that big of a deal when I was on it. So I actually broke through the ice and got to someone in legal and who kicked me over to somebody in marketing and said, hey, we might want to start using these things. This is early on in YouTube when IJSBA was still vehemently saying you can't put our stuff on YouTube, and which since then I've given up on. But I went to them and said, I think we might. I've got all the masters. I have them all in our storage, right?
Hmm.
I think I'd like to start using some of this for our nostalgia. Get ready to do Hall of Fame. I might want to use this. Can I? What do you want from us to let IJSBA republish a lot of this content?
Hmm.
And so you can have it. Don't worry about it. You can have it. We're not
Yeah.
interested in continuing to protect that
Yeah.
copyright. And I swear to God, let me ask you something. I said, wait, are jet ski racers still the same old entitled assholes they were back when I was working with them? Well, and I'm not trying to I'm not trying to bag on people. I'm just trying to say that if you conduct your attitude in a way that if someone were in a business you were patronizing, you wouldn't patronize the
Yeah.
place, right? You wouldn't invest your money there, and that becomes a thing. There is fair criticism to make of me because I play it conservative,
Hmm.
right? I don't take risks that I know have the potential to backfire very hard. That's a fair thing to do. But at the same time, those deals aren't there in the
Right.
big capacity.
Yeah.
And forgetting the attitudes for a second, it really is the case that we have a demographic problem.
Yep.
The base product is bought by people that are of an age outside the sweet spot by like a decade
Mhm.
outside of the sweet spot wheelhouse, even though the actual competitors probably skew lower.
Mhm.
And then you get into problems that have happened the last few years that InBev bought Budweiser and all them. They don't even want to have their logo associated with any event that allows a minor to participate.
Yep.
So there is a lot of this, and Red Bull, etc. It seems like it's cooled off a little bit, but they and Monster were about to be the biggest target of, oh my God, and you're giving these kids diabetes and
Yep.
you're giving them too much sugar and all that. Oh, we're gonna sue, we're gonna sue, we're gonna sue. And by that point, they could just pop the stuff at the grocery store. You buy it anyway,
Yeah.
most of that tax stuff is just they'll give it to the government or the sponsorship is they'll end up giving it to the government anyway, so let's burn it in the most efficient places
Yeah.
possible.
Yeah, to give some personal insight to hopefully kind of back up some of the stuff that Frazier's saying here, I work in PR and I help manage marketing budgets that are massive for companies that are investing in racing and power sports, all kinds of stuff. The budget exists, and those companies are looking at return on investment and value. And, jet skiers constantly, what I see over and over on Facebook that drives me nuts is like, brands don't want to work with jet skiing. They don't like the racing. IJSBA World Finals needs TV, blah, blah, blah. I can tell you, based on my bank account, that I am making money off of jet ski racing. It's not my payout for winning something. It's brands investing in my brand, my attitude, my content that I'm making. And I think racers are just like completely missing the boat on that, is that to build value in the sport, it has to come from everybody, not just Scott Frazier helping manage the world finals. It's both sides. And I just keep seeing that complaint over and over again, and it drives me nuts. I'm sure, Scott, that you can help contribute to getting sponsorship dollars, but it shouldn't be just your problem all the time and the IGSBA's problem. Like, jet skiers can create revenue and create value. And we see that in Supercross when Hayden Deegan is the most famous person on the internet. He brings value to Supercross, and Supercross can pitch those personalities and those stories and all that cool stuff when they're trying to go get sponsorship dollars. But if the jet ski industry only has 10 people to stand on that are putting the good attitude forward and doing a lot of marketing and helping create that value, there's only so much that we can do, and I would say, again, the racers are also looking really narrowly at the racing community, and Kawasaki and Yamaha are looking at all those 40 to 50 something year old dudes that want the biggest sit down couch on the market. And they're not trying to sell to racers. Like, there are tons of jet skiers in the world, but most of them are not anywhere near interested in racing.
Well, and that becomes some of the stuff that we tried to put on, like this little owners convention thing, is the last couple of years I've tried to direct the focus into recapturing post-COVID the culture of personal watercraft and
Mm-hmm.
having world finals be the bedrock of that. And there's a few things that have changed that we've got to work on, and I don't know they can be worked on. I mean, hell, I went to the Sand Sport show
Mm-hmm.
one time and was like, okay, the deals aren't here anymore, right? I got to fly down from Bay Area to Southern California, got to go to Sand Sport Show and pay the ticket, and I'm probably going to drink a beer, and that's going to be $12, and I'm going to be drunk later, and so I'll stay a night, and the next thing I know, I'm what a small vacation used to cost to go to the
Yeah.
Sand Sport Show. Now that's fine if I can get LED whips and all that at a price that I couldn't get it anywhere else. But
Yeah.
the fact is, it's not cheaper at those anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It's the best deal is probably Black Friday or Cyber Monday, and I'll get the shipping for free on it.
Yeah.
So there becomes refocusing the experience there for, hey, I want to come shake hands, learn about the product from actually the person who produces it, touch and feel the products. Maybe I'll buy it there, maybe I won't. So we cut back. I knew last year was going to be a tough year. I mean, the shock to this event and to watercraft racing in general, we're about to get a really bad post-inflation surprise. It's going to catch up with us this year,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I've gone back to some of the people that tend to do larger booths there. I said, listen, here's the deal. I know that you guys spent less at World Finals in 2024. Make a deal. I'm not going to try to get you back to where you used to be if you will do your own media program,
Hmm.
right? If you'll do your own, this is how we box to World Finals. These are some of our guys coming in the shop. This is all the back things that happen before we get there. More personality, more this is who I am. This is the coffee cup that I keep on
The
my desk
lifestyle.
and why I do. Yeah. And what if we recapture that in the aggregate in a series of small reels as opposed to trying to get a 1 hour television program that not
Yeah.
only are we not is not cost feasible to produce, but probably no one's going to watch the whole thing,
Hmm.
right? Like, 15-minute episodes, things like that. I think that is the path that we need to get on for exposure. If that can show positive light, we'll get more people. But we have I think the sun is setting on this, but we just went through a several year period where all these new marketing goon kids that are just out of college are getting their fresh job, and they didn't read textbooks or go to the library like old relics like I did. And they're totally focused on something new. They would rather, for the brand, somebody with 30,000 followers eat a bowl of soup with a watercraft. I almost said the brand name. No, the watercraft sitting right behind them, than they would seeing that watercraft in action,
Yeah.
than they would making almost the most minimal support on preserving organized events,
Hmm.
right? Like they're not doing that. I think they're finally starting to realize, like, okay, supported content or content that furthers our mission is as important as just content in general,
Yes.
right? That
100%.
the culture of wanting to enjoy this. I mean, sponsor sponsor, right? So if you can get more people there, the excitement is there, and people had a good time at the event, then there's a good feeling about where they put their money, and there is some value on it because people associate it with a good memory, a good time. But that's not going to bring us $100,000. It's
Right.
not going to bring us $1 million. It is trying to take the whole net. Anyone that wants to put into personal watercraft, have them do some media, have us give them base content with, and try to recapture as much as we can of the old ways back in the aggregate.
Hmm. Yeah, I think I agree with you on most of that stuff. Like I said, coming from a marketing background, like I think we're gonna put this into a second episode where we talk more about, what you're working on and how we can improve things. But I think the marketing and the communication is super important. And I can tell you, I keep hearing the like, oh, we need TV back, we need TV back. I don't think TV is the answer. It would be really nice to have, but TV, I don't think is the deal breaker for us getting sponsors because there's other amounts out there like Mod Podge tractor pulling that can get sponsors, but it's not because they have TV. It's because they have something that a brand needs and a brand wants that they see value in. So my personal message to the jet skiers would be we as a community need to work on building value in our sport and maybe not just thinking about how awesome we are and how fast we are and getting our own personal sponsors, regardless of trying to get sponsors or not from a personal perspective, just putting out valuable content, having a good attitude, being a good potential brand ambassador, that's going to affect the entire sport as a whole. And I think we've kind of gotten to a point where there's a lot of complaining and, a lot of like woulda, coulda, shoulda type stuff. And I think that based on my own personal experience and the brands that I work with and the conversations that I've had is that we have all the potential, but we're missing this value that I don't think you are solely responsible for, Scott.
Well, I mean, there also becomes a part of this that there are not resources here for me to do more than I'm already doing. There is one board member that was supposed to be taking on our media presence, and they were grilling me for a while on what are you gonna do about social media. I can't do anything more. You guys have me running this company, and I have been keeping this sport alive by good business acumen, being very conservative with the business, and I'm known as one of the leading people in drafting water sport based waivers right now. So I have kept us going and kept us out of risk. You would not walk into your attorney's office and tell them to do your Facebook. Please don't ask me to do it because I know God gosh darn well that you're not going to give me any more money,
Hmm.
right? So I'm at the max of what I can do. Now, it is fair to say that, hey, look, you're the leader of this. I mean, de facto, I am the leader of this personal watercraft racing sport. I'll accept the lightning rod for some of that stuff, but solutions have to be realistic,
Yeah.
right? And this is part of my thing with the efficiency is it is not efficient to have IJSBA do the television program. If there's going to be a television, I mean, and just like you say, I mean, I've got an 8-year old son. He actually came to his first World Finals this past year, and I brought him out on the dock to watch freestyle, and he watched a couple of them, and bam, Roblox came right out of his phone. I don't think he watches much TV, but he'll watch YouTube reels, all
Hmm.
day. And I watch some TV. I'm middle aged, so I don't watch anything good probably. But point is, I wouldn't discover something new
Hmm.
on TV myself, and I'm out of that age spectrum. So the point being is that the solutions probably aren't going to come from IJSBA. They're going to come from a symbiotic relationship with people that develop content that I mean, King's Cup is this. King's Cup is in they have a media package that happens to be assigned currently to personal watercraft.
Hmm.
Will it forever? Maybe, maybe not. There are
Hmm.
some things that go that people think are interesting. We had those what's the word for those little overpriced motorized surfboards? What are they called?
Oh, the
Jet
jet
boards?
surfs, the jet surfs.
What? Yeah, whatever they are. They they came I they came to me first, right? The underwriters were like, "Go see Frazier. He'll set you guys up and all that." And I did an event or two sanctioning them, and I was like, you know what? This is an ultimately go nowhere product. I don't want the risk for IJSBA. It's great to have another 200 members this
Hmm.
particular year lining lining the,
The reserves.
coffer.
Hmm.
Yeah, but it's not worth the time that I put in there. Membership is contracted out, so that reaches a level that someone else is willing to do, where they're like, this is too much work. And it's the same here. I wasn't willing to assign any more IJSBA office time to them, so I punted them, and a rival promoter, let's say, picked them up and
Hmm.
carried them for a while. But it was ultimately a go no place
Yeah,
gig.
it fizzled out.
You look at those, yeah, $13,000 for one of those, and you can buy a full ski for that. This has a short lifespan.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that. So, I think we're probably going to break this into two parts because I do want to talk a lot about, the qualms people have and, what your plans are for the future and, how we can improve and also work with you as a community. But I think I just kind of want to reiterate that, I think that based on my experience in my professional career outside of jet ski racing, completely separate, I've had behind the scenes access to seeing how events like King of the Hammers, MotoGP, and now a Supercross as well. I was doing the Supercross tour for several years, and more recently this electric boat racing series E1. And I don't think people realize the gravity of these productions that they look at and they say, I want jet ski racing to be like that, or how does that sport have sponsors and we don't? And I don't think they understand that these teams have 5 people doing social media and 20 people doing the broadcast, and they have 80 people running just the operations of the event. Where do the boats go in and who's going to the starting line? And I don't think they realize the cost and the gravity to put those things on. And it's not to say that jet ski racing can't be that, but you can't just say like, the IJSBA should be doing X and just expect it to happen because these other sports, one, they've been going forever, and two, they have budget. They have things going on. Their reserves are probably quadruple what you have to work with. And then they have the sponsors on top of that. And the other thing is, a lot of those sports are closed communities where they only allow, invited racers or very select groups of racers to race. And they don't necessarily have to deal with 1,000 people complaining about how they want these rules or this class or this new hole to come in. So I think that the racers in general should probably take a step back and kind of look at how these things operate and maybe hopefully get like you said, realistic expectations. It's not to say that we can't be like those sports in the future, but I think there's a lot of disconnect with, you know, the manpower, the budget, and the teams that are fueling those because nobody ever talks about those unless you're there behind the scenes working it and with them. And I don't think jet skiers, not all of them, grasp that.
Well, there's one thing I would like to follow that with for the public to know if they've forgotten it or never knew it is that what IJSBA is doing is necessary for the global sport to
Mhm.
survive. Someone has to be doing this, or else what we do here will be fractured into 1,000 little tiny pieces of one race here, one race there. Some will be big, some will be small, and there's not keeping anything cohesive.
Yeah.
And we have to be doing that. When the time comes that something else gets dropped off, or new opportunities come up, we've always been prepared to take those opportunities when they come. When they come, IJSBA doesn't charge sanctioning fees to promoters. We do the only thing that we charge promoters is they have to buy the license. There's an administrative fee for doing the competition license that we give back to the promoters to handle their time for running a card or taking the information and all that. But we give to other people the right to keep every cent that they can make.
Yeah.
We do the bedrock. They can do the bigger things. I want World Finals to be as big as it can possibly be. Right now, the way the sport is situated, the customer is the competitor. And all of these other things that you've talked about, the customer is not the competitor. The customer are people paying entry fees and big market media, etc. Maybe we'll get there again. I don't know. I
Mhm.
don't know. But in the meantime, not preserving where we're at will leave us unable to capitalize off of anything that comes down the line. So
Yeah.
I'll take the criticism for the conservative way that I play it, but I do want people to know that that's a very real situation.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. Especially, I think the other thing that people don't think about is any racing sport, period, has really risky maneuvering with local legislators, especially because we're on the water, EPA, there's things coming down the pipeline that could potentially be out of our control. And then the lawyer side, like you're saying, the risk factor, the waivers, all that stuff, you're kind of the buffer in between the racers and all of the things that are trying to make sure that we can't go racing and have fun. You and the IJSBA are the buffer that helps us go racing at all. And while, we would love TV and, red carpet treatment and all of this stuff, like if we can't race at all, we're going to have a much bigger problem than if we feel like a rock star on the television.
Well, let's take Havasu for example. The place has evolved so much. I mean, it's the only when I first went, it was this cheap, great freedom place to go to with beautiful sunsets and predictable weather. And our weather is a little bit less predictable. The place is much more expensive to be
Yeah.
at. And if people haven't noticed, besides the balloon festival, we are the only mega event that stays there. Run to the Sun Balloon Festival and World Finals are really the triad, the big off-road racing, all those they bounce as soon as the seed money is there because they're so dependent on heavy seed money, and it is getting more and more expensive to produce an event in Lake
Yeah.
Havasu City, and we've found a way to be sustainable. So I
Mhm.
just want people to
Yeah.
think about that while they're coming up with strategies or things to pitch to us or to whoever.
Yeah, and to clarify, when you're talking about seed money, you're talking about like the tourist bureau. Like there's events that go to certain cities, even if they totally suck, because those cities pay them to come. And it sounds like IGSBA is not, or World Finals is not really doing that so much.
I have we get a low amount from the city, and we're grateful to get it. I don't want it to sound like, oh my God, they don't give us anything. They give us, we are a standing line item there and have been, and I'm hoping they're going to renew us for now. And they've been generous to us. So I want to know but exactly what you said. Sometimes my presentation is a little bit stern and sour, And that was a difficulty that I had with one of the Go Lake Havasu negotiators. Like, are you saying if we don't give you more money, you might not do World Finals here? I said, no, what I'm saying is there is a market rate for this event. A lot of places are willing to spend some, maybe even six figures for us to come for a year or two to
Mhm.
see if we can bring this type of regular base there. Eventually the costs are going to be such that if we don't get an adequate revenue stream, we can't do it here at all. Now,
Yeah.
does that mean that the CVB is responsible for us being there? No, it doesn't. Does it mean that I've really, really, really got to work hard for the CVB money to carry us in a
Hmm.
place like that? Yes, it does. And I don't eventually, I mean, maybe it will, maybe it won't. Everyone wants to go to Lake Havasu City for this event. My my inbox is flooded right now with like, oh my God, you got to make sure Havasu still happens. It's mythical. How about we set up a this? How about we partner this way with other series? I mean, there's
Hmm.
these things are happening.
Yeah.
So people want to go, but it's expensive to go,
Yeah.
right?
I
And
think
I do not
to
go
try
ahead.
and simplify it for the jet skiers, so the seed money that you're talking about comes from the Visitors Bureau, and they get money from taxes. So, like, there's a little bit of tax from sales in town, the gas. You come to town, you buy your groceries, you go to the gas station, you hang out at the bar. There's a little bit of tax that goes back to the Tourist Bureau, and the Tourist Bureau spends that on things that will help get people to come to town. So, billboards, events, stuff like that. And I think what you're trying to say is you could go somewhere that nobody wants to go to, and they would pay you to bring this event to that town. So we could be going to New York in the middle of January because New York really needs an event, and they offer you $100,000 to put on an event. And we would be miserable, but you would have money to have a stage and have this and have that. But because the IJSBA World Finals is synonymous with Havasu, you're trying to keep it there. So you could go somewhere else and get paid more, but we want to be in Lake Havasu.
It's a matter of a balance, right? It's a matter of a balance. And like I said, everybody wants to go. I still like going. Probably I'm happy to leave at 52. I've definitely had some years where I've wished to stay another week and all that because I love the place so much, but I've been 20, 32 years ago was my World Finals. It's just changed a lot, and we have to change with it, and that means being conservative. And if we do another one of these, which I hope we do, I hope you'll come out. Stage infrastructure, grandstands. There's a lot of emails and things that I can show you. We can go over. Just talk about how part of it is you're directing the stream, and another part of it is the stream is finding its own way, and at some point they intersect.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where we are.
Yeah. So I think at this point I want to break it off and we'll have at least have a follow-up episode because there's some future plan kind of stuff that I want to talk about. And then on top of that, I'm hoping that I can come out and visit the offices and maybe go through some of this stuff. Scott was, when I reached out to Scott initially, I wasn't sure if he would want to join because I think he gets a lot of persecution from the community, and I was concerned that he would think I was setting him up to be crucified here. But he's actually really nice, reached out right away and extended the offer for me to actually come out to the offices and show me some of like the paperwork and stuff, to kind of talk about some of the things that are rumbling around on the internet. But I appreciate that you've come on at all. It sounds like we're going to do a follow-up episode and talk about, some forecasting of the future and, maybe what you've got going on. I know you mentioned a couple times, like, where does Scott Frazier step away at some point? It sounds like, you've kind of had your run and maybe you're thinking about it at least. So
I'll put it
I,
out there for you right now. Last year, I gave a 3-year notice. Sorry, at the end of 2023, I gave a 3-year notice, which is 2024, 2025, and 2026. 2026 is the last year that I will accept responsibility for the World Finals, period. That's final. That is
hey,
final.
you
All
heard it
right.
here from Scott
I
Frazier.
may I may be willing to run IJSB the company and exclusively do what I was brought on to do until someone else can be found that has a mixture of experience with watercraft, experience with law, and and all of these things together that can kind of guide it around or whatever new thing it could take. But as far as World Finals goes, that 3 year notice that I gave is real.
All right. I think that's right where we should end it before part two, is you heard it here first. He does not plan to stick around forever. He's put in his 3 year notice. But yeah, Scott, thank you so much for taking the time. It's been like almost 2 hours of your time. I really appreciate it. We'll do a follow-up. I'll put this one out and then we'll have a follow-up, and then hopefully I can set aside some time to come out and see you and see what you have going on up there. Do you have any final parting words before we wrap it up?
Oh, it's the end of winter soon. We'll be posting stuff online. Please check. I think there'll be some exciting developments people will see coming. The door's open. It was a rough last few months, so you guys know where to find me. And I thank you for the opportunity of having me here. And hopefully, this is some value into steering this in a direction that people feel confident about the sport they're investing in.
Yeah, I think having you on is going to be good. People will get to kind of hear some things straight from you. And hopefully by the next time we talk, we'll have even more to talk about than I already planned on. And I look forward to hopefully making this a regular thing so people can kind of hear what's going on in your head.
All right. Well, thank you, Anna.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Scott. This is the Pump Wash Podcast. I'm your host, Jet Girl 777. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share this podcast with all your jet ski bros. And be sure to follow me on Instagram, jetgirl_777, for all kinds of rad jet ski content. And stay tuned for our next episode.